In 1908, on the Greek island of Crete, an archaeologist dug up a small disk of baked clay. Both sides were covered in strange symbols, spiraling inward like a secret coiled tight. There were 241 symbols in total, pressed into the clay in a tight spiral pattern. The man who found it was the Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier, and he was stunned. Because over 100 years later, not one person on Earth can read a single word of it. This is the Phaistos Disc, and it is the most famous undeciphered message in human history. It was found in the ruins of a grand palace at Phaistos, on the south coast of Crete. It lay in a basement room beside a linear A tablet and a pile of burned ancient debris. That palace belonged to the Minoans, a brilliant Bronze Age people who ruled the seas around 1700 BC. The Minoans were rich, artistic, and powerful, and then their entire civilization was destroyed and vanished. A massive volcanic eruption and later invaders helped wipe their world off the map. Around 1600 BC, the volcano on the island of Thera exploded in one of history's deadliest eruptions. It buried whole towns in ash and sent a giant wave that drowned the Minoan coast. As many as 30,000 people may have died, and the Minoan fleet was crippled in a single day. Entire Minoan towns were buried so deep in ash that they stayed lost for over 3,000 years. Within a few generations, invaders from the Greek mainland killed and conquered what the volcano had spared. And when the Minoans died out, their language and their writing died with them. And here is why that lost language traps us so completely even now. The Minoans wrote in a script we call Linear A, and to this day, Linear A is unreadable. But here is the first detail that makes the Phaistos Disc so impossible to crack. Across both faces, the 241 symbols use only 45 different signs, repeated over and over. Those 45 signs show tiny pictures: a walking man, a fish, a bird, a shield, a flower. One sign, a man's head wearing a spiked crest, appears 13 times, more than any other. Some think that crested head names a people or a king now utterly lost to history. The signs are grouped into about 61 little clusters, which look exactly like written words. So this is almost certainly real writing, a true message that someone meant for us to read. But here is why that message has defeated every genius who has ever tried to read it. To crack any lost script, code breakers usually need a second text in a known language. That is exactly how the famous Rosetta Stone unlocked the hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt. A similar script called Linear B was finally cracked in 1952 by a young man named Michael Ventris. Ventris proved Linear B was an early form of Greek, and the dead suddenly spoke again. But for the Phaistos Disc, no Michael Ventris has ever come, and its words stay dead. But the Phaistos Disc matches no Linear B, no Linear A, and no other known script on Earth. But for the Phaistos Disc, there is no Rosetta Stone, and there is no second text at all. And here is the truly maddening part that haunts every codebreaker who studies it. The disc is just too short, with only 241 symbols, to give codebreakers enough to work with. With so few words, there are simply too many possible languages it could be hiding. Now imagine you are handed this disc and told to read a message from a dead civilization. You hold 4,000-year-old words in your hands, and you cannot speak a single one aloud. You do not know the language, the alphabet, or even which direction you are supposed to read. Most experts now think you read it from the outer edge, spiraling inward toward the center. But even that basic direction is still argued over by serious scholars today. And then there is the detail that makes the Phaistos Disc absolutely extraordinary. Every symbol on it was not carved by hand, but stamped into the wet clay with a punch. Whoever made it had a full set of 45 reusable stamps, one carved for each separate sign. That makes this disc, from 1700 BC, the oldest known example of movable type on Earth. It is a printing idea invented over 3,000 years before Gutenberg printed his famous Bible. Yet whoever invented this brilliant idea seems to have used it only once and then stopped. No other stamped object like it exists, and the idea died with whoever first invented it. So this idea, born 3,000 years too early, was used a single time and then lost for millennia. But here is where the story takes a darker and more suspicious turn. Because the disc is so strange and so unique, some scholars believe it is a modern forgery. They argue that Luigi Pernier may have faked it in 1908 to make his name as a discoverer. If they are right, the world's most famous ancient message would be exposed as a worthless hoax, and a century of brilliant, obsessive work would die as a complete and total waste. Most experts strongly disagree, and they insist the disc is genuinely ancient. After all, similar stamped signs were later found on a Bronze Age axe at archaeologists on Crete. But the museum in Crete has so far refused to allow the clay to be physically tested. So even the simple question of whether it is real is still not fully settled today. Over the past 100 years, hundreds of people have claimed they finally cracked the code. Some say it is a prayer, others a calendar, a story, a treaty, or a list of soldiers. One scholar was sure it was a call to arms. Another was certain it honored a great goddess. But every single one of these solutions has been rejected by other experts as guesswork. With only 241 symbols and no second text, almost any clever theory can be made to fit. And that is the cruel trap of the Phaistos Disc. It gives just enough to tempt, never enough to prove. Even modern computers and codebreakers have thrown their full power at those 241 symbols. But here is the cruel truth. More data died with the Minoans than any computer can ever recover. And still, the message from those long-dead Minoans refuses to give up its meaning. Somewhere on that clay, a real person 4,000 years ago left words they believed mattered. Maybe it was a prayer to a god, or a king's command, or simply someone's name. Whatever it says, that person fully expected someone someday to read their words. And 4,000 years later, you and I are still staring at it, completely unable to answer. Every year, more of the scholars who study it grow old and die. The answer still out of reach. So what does this little clay disc really teach you about how fragile knowledge is? It teaches you that a whole language, once alive in thousands of mouths, can die out completely and vanish. And it reminds you that some messages, once lost, stay dead and locked away from us forever. Until someone finds a second text in that lost Minoan tongue, the disc keeps its silence.